Welcome to episode 23 of the Filmumentaries podcast. This is me, Jamie Benning, talking to you from my house here in southeast London. A big welcome also to my two new patrons, Paul and Mark, who kindly donate, along with another 41 of you, each month to help me make this podcast. So a real big thanks to all of you that continue to do so. It really means a lot to me. If you want to become a part of the Filmumentaries family, please go to patreon.com/Jamie Benning and check out the different tiers, two of which come with a gift. Mark and the others in the top two tiers will be getting some freshly printed posters in the mail very shortly. All thanks to my friend and collaborator, Pete Starling. Okay, so for this episode, I spoke with camera assistant Madelyn Most, listed as second assistant camera on both Star Wars and The Empire Strikes Back. Madelyn offers another unique perspective from within the 70s and 80s film industry. Despite that period of the industry being dominated by men, I didn't really want my podcast to be, so I was really glad to be able to reach out and get in touch with Madelyn. And hearing the point of view of a woman who worked in what was then a very sexist industry, at a time when representations of women were also typically what we would call, I guess, problematic now, is part of the education I wanted for myself in doing this podcast. These often aren't the stories that are widely told, and they're important. And, that's the reason I do this podcast. I want to find these stories and I want to get them out there. Madelyn is great fun, and I love talking to her over a couple of evenings. She's full of energy and stories. We've chatted a few times since, actually. And I've also interviewed her partner, director Peter Macdonald, who will be the subject of the next episode coming later this month, April 2020. What year is it? 2021. It's hard to keep track. So Madelyn, take me back to 1976. What had you been doing before you got the call to work on what ended up being the biggest film in film history?
Yeah. Well, I was thinking you were going to ask me that. So I actually was at a meeting. We had this, not Women Behind the Lens, that was LA, but we had this women's film collective in London. And I was at a friend's house in, South Kent, where it's Notting Hill Gate and the Church Road. And I was there in her apartment. We're having this meeting, and I think I got a call, and I didn't have a car or anything. And they said, "Can you be at Shepperton Studios tomorrow?" And I had two booking agencies, so I was like, well, yeah, but I was at this meeting, so I ran home and I got ready, and I had to take, so let's see, I was living at Connaught Square, so I had to take a tube to the train to get up to was it Elstree or Shepperton? I can't, maybe it was Shepperton the first call. Yeah, it was Shepperton, so that was even worse. And I had to do this big schlep, bus to train to walk to whatever to get to the studio. And I didn't know what I was coming from. I had gone to London Film School. I had gone to University in Paris. I studied philosophy and political science and art school. And then my boyfriend at the time had moved up to London. I went quickly out to Berkeley and finished up and came back. And so I had been, I was in film school, and I got little jobs with BFI and very interesting people. And I just got this call out of the blue. Which my then husband takes credit for in some way, but he became my husband. But I just got this call, and I went out there, and I knew nothing. I mean, I worked on little documentaries, or I worked on BFI films. I actually worked on the first Black feature film ever made called Pressure with Horace Ove, who was the guy who became my husband, Michael Davis's best friend. So, but I was just a kid, and I was working all the time. Because my parents cut me off. I wanted to go to law school, and then I wanted to go to film school. My father said, absolutely not. No daughter of mine will go with those people, orgies and sex and liquor and all that. So I said, yeah, I'm going to do it anyway. But he forbade me to go to law school. So I said, I'll do worse. I'll become a documentary maker. So anyway, a lot of defiance there. And so I needed to work. I didn't have any money. I had to put myself through school. And I think my boyfriend then helped me put through school. And so I got the first job with Tony Beaker or something. And Kevin Brownlow was on it, and all these people were making this BMI film. And then I got this call to do Pressure. And then after that, I was just, doing here and there. I got my union ticket. I went to a lab, got my union ticket, and I got this call, and I turn up and I see these white lobster suits, and I see this big stage, and I look around me, and I didn't know Jeff Glover at all. Jeff Glover, this bushy redheaded guy. And I said to Jeff recently in the last few years, why did you call me? How did you call me? And he said, we were winding up Gil Taylor, because Gil Taylor had a reputation as a womanizer. And so they were going to wind him up. There never was a girl in the camera department before. So they thought it would be a funny joke. And there I was. I turned up. I was very boyish. I knew I had to not be a girl and not have, a shape or anything. And he tells me I wore funny clothes. I had a Swiss Army backpack. I really was weird. And I thought, that's fine. And so it was Jeff Glover and Tony Browning, we just got on like sparks. They were so funny. And I thought it was going to be a couple of days, they were going to have their prank, and then I'd go off. But what happened is Gil Taylor went crazy. He said, who hired this girl? This is he didn't say disgusting. He said, this is a disgrace to the British camera department. We don't have girls in the camera department. And nobody spoke to me for about a week. And I kept looking around because I'm always smiling. I was so happy to be there. And I was like, oh my God, this is so much fun. And the first thing, because I, in those days, spoke very British. I tried to pretend I'm not American born. I'm born in New York. So I put on a British accent. But immediately there was Carrie and Harrison and Mark, and go, who are you? And I'm going, well, I'm Madelyn. Who are you? Well, I'm Carrie. Well, I'm Mark. And where are you from? I'm from New York. Where are you from? And so we got on. And so, but while it was going on, the people were ignoring me. And it turns out, as the story goes, that Gil Taylor wanted me to be fired. And George and Marsha Lucas said, well, we've been watching her. She does the work and she'll stay. And so after that week or 4 days, whatever it was, everybody was fine. Hi, Maddie. Hi, Maddie. Hi, Maddie. That was so strange. Everybody stopped talking to me. And now I'm like, new kid in town. And then it was just so much fun because, as I say, Jeff Glover is so lovely and Tony Browning is the funniest cameraist in the world. I mean, we just hit it off. We used to exchange clothes. I like your T-shirt. I like yours. We'd go in the bathroom and we'd change clothes. And he was friends with my then husband. Well, Michael became my husband. Who trained me really was Michael Davis. Now, you might not know the name Michael Davis. He did documentaries. He did Disappearing World. He did very political. He's very political. He did World in Actions. He was part of AKA. He was one of the directors of AKA, very political. And then he did television. But his son is Ben Davis. His grandson is Roman Griffin Davis. So that's the Davis dynasty. So anyway, Michael had trained me up, and in fact, Michael said, well, it was Brian Probin who told Jeff Glover, but it was very small. Apparently I was the only girl. There was Jo Aby, but she worked, her father had a commercial company, but there were no other girls. And all the guys would tease me, oh, you're going to get muscles. You're going to get big arms and big, and I went, buzz off. So, but once they saw that I was tough, I wouldn't let anybody handle my camera boxes or anything, then they were okay, and they became the greatest friends. I mean, the people on the first Star Wars who were great to me was Kenny Atherfeld, the Griff, and Peter Taylor was great, and Little Lou. We have such stories from that film, because I was watching Robert Watts tell the story. It was a very small film. They had no money. I mean, when I came on, they had come back from Tunisia, and they just had a couple of weeks to do it to finish up, I guess, which the film wasn't finished up. And then the dollar did a big drop. And so you got more pounds, and they got another 3 weeks or a month or whatever. So I stayed on and meeting everybody and befriending everybody and having so much fun. And I didn't want to go home because there were all these shops with the big, the fighter planes and the models. And I love all that stuff. I mean, that's my world. So at night I wrapped up all my cameras. I knew nothing. I knew about the cameras. I knew how to load magazines and things like that, but it's all sheets, and you got to keep books with the lens and the focus and the how many feet to each take, and you got to keep all this record like a secretary. And I'd be there till 9 o'clock at night. Normally you do it during the day. So, but that was okay because I was there till very late at night, and it was getting into summer now. And then I'd bring it into the office. There'd be Robert Watts and Pat Carr and all these people. And are my sheets okay? And if they were okay, I'd do them over. And then I'd buzz around the different shops, all the art department. I love the art department. To this day, I love the art department. I could get lost there. And I thought, I loved camera. I mean, that's what I discovered. I had come out of art school, and then I came to London to join my boyfriend, and he was already in film school. So I had to go to 3 different schools, and then finally I said, I can't. I'm going to Chelsea. I'm going to Sir John Cowles. I need to go to St. Martin's, which was right across the street from the London Film School. And they let me in. And then on weekends, I used to work on his friends' films, and I put my eye behind the eyepiece, and I said, this is it. Because you're so lonely as a painter, drawing all by yourself in your own little world. But suddenly, you're with all these people, and you're with lighting, and I always loved operating. That was my big thing. I was going to be a great operator. And you've got the story, and you've got the writers, and you've got the editing, and you've got sound, and you've got music. It's like this world, this fantasy world you never want to escape. So that was it. I knew this was it for life. But mind you, when I was very young, my parents were European, so they sent me away from New York to at 14, and I went to Denmark first to live, and then down to Switzerland. And when I was in Denmark in a cinema, and I saw something on the screen it was in Swedish with Norwegian subtitles. And that was The Seventh Seal. And I saw that photography, and I said, that's what I want to be. I'm going to be a photographer. And I knew that's what I'm going to be. So in a nutshell, there I am. And everybody was friendly with me. I was always smiling. No, but that's the joke. After Georgia Marcia said she stays, then I'd be in my camera department, and we have lots of magazines. I mean, there'd be an Arri, there'd be PVSR, Panaflex, like 7 different things. So there'd be 8 magazines, what you can't really, you just did them all at night. He had a red Porsche convertible. He'd wait in front of the camera room, and then he'd say, Maddie, can I drive you home tonight? And I'd go, no, thank you. By that time, I bought a car. I bought a little Morris Minor, but it was just like, he, and it's funny because, yeah, he wore a silk tie and, one of the, not a tie, but, one of those cravat and cufflinks. And later he said to me, well, you have to understand, I didn't take to women in the camera department in my day, because he worked with Hitchcock and everything. I had to bring the tea on with porcelain teacups and silver spoons. And that's the kind of mentality I come from. But very late in his life, I went down to his house in Isle of Wight, and I stayed about a week. I said, now you're going to take me through your whole life. And you know me because I'm the kid that you worked with.
Unfortunately, at this point, we had some connection problems, so the recording is missing here. But what Madelyn did say is that she visited Gil on the Isle of Wight in his house later in his life, and he was quite remorseful of the way he treated both her and George Lucas. She then went on to talk about a story about Robert Watts. She'd just seen my Robert Watts video, which is still available on Vimeo, and she wanted to tell a story of just how nice Robert is.
The Robert Watts story was that, I can't remember. Yeah, it must have been on the first one, because by the second one I was experienced, that we had this shot, although I think that's in the second film. Anyway, that we had this reverse load shot of Mark going the tunnel. And so the camera was running in reverse. So on the Arri magazine, instead of going right to left and you take out the stuff on the right and send it to the lab, it goes the other way. So maybe I wasn't paying attention, or with the 17 other magazines I'm downloading. The next day we're watching Rushes, because we did that all together at lunchtime. And our shot comes up and it's blank. And I died of death. And I went, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. I died. It was like, okay, well. And then I went to Robert and said, oh, Robert, I'm going to die. And he goes, no problem, Maddie. because that was a reverse load. And if you did what we did, and Kubrick taught, I guess it was Peter Robinson. Yes, it must have been the second. Kubrick had this thing for insurance purposes that even if you had that much film, if you had an inch or 10 inches of film, you send it in, because if ever there was streaking or a flaw in the negative, you get it back. You get an insurance claim. So everything, every night we sent off to the lab, and then we, in a black bag, we wrapped up whatever remained, and we marked it with the serial number. So then I went, and Robert said, just find that's a nice film. And there it was. I sent it to the lab, and and my life was saved. But, I wouldn't have thought of it. But you had so much on your mind, because both of them were so big, and the first one was a bit overwhelming. I mean, I only got by because it was so funny with we're having so much fun with Jeff Glover and Tony Browning, and George liked Jeff a lot. He'd come over to him and he'd say, do this, do that. In fact, he asked him to go off. He said, I'm doing a film about the Vietnam War. And he said, maybe you can come with me. Jeff didn't go with him. He went off with Gil Taylor someplace, but that was Apocalypse. Yeah. So George really made friends with Jeff. And Jeff, as you know, in the second one, he got the title of director of photography for Finsa and everything. But it just was the chemistry of, we got on so well. And as I say, there were a few people that were great. Like we had these big, for a big wide shot, we had this big clapperboard, and like Harrison I nearly cut his nose off. So Kenny Atherfold took me aside, because I went, 29, take one, bang, and the actor's right there. And he said, you don't do it that way, you do it dunk. And I go, oh, okay.
You mentioned because you were one of the few women there, but also you were one of the few Americans on the British crew. So was your kind of camaraderie with the cast, Mark and Harrison and Carrie, based on the fact that you were Americans, sort of out of your usual comfort zone in a way? Did you bond with them because of that?
I think that must be because Carrie and we saw each other. I mean, I saw her at Cannes. We were friends. I ran into her in Hawaii. I ran into her in Beverly Hills. She'd invited me to parties in New York. I mean, we hung out. We really hung out on the second film, because my husband was in South Africa doing an Athol Fugard movie for like 3 or 4 months. And her boyfriend became her husband, Paul Simon, was out in Africa doing something. So at night I'd go to her house, and why be alone? And we really hung out together. We were friends. But I think on the first one, the British, I tried to be very British. I tried to pretend, but you have a certain personality. In Britain, just like, don't talk to the actors, don't smile, don't do this, don't bar, but I can't be that way. I grew up around people, in Paris. My best friend's father was Jack Lemmon. So I knew people, and they just want to be calm. They want to be relaxed. They want warm, loving, hugging, touching. They don't want that British, and that, I think, was the friction between George and Gil Taylor. Gil Taylor had this arrogance, this, I'm so important, I've done this film, and what's this kid, white sneakers and a Madras shirt. And he was horrible to him. He was really horrible. I mean, the whole crew was horrible to George. And I'm going, what's going on? Why is everybody? And it was because a young, well, he wasn't vivacious. You can't call George vivacious, but he was in his head, and he just wore jeans and, no pomp and circumstance. And Tony Way was horrible. The first AD was horrible. He sabotaged the film. I saw him at somebody's funeral about 10 years ago, somebody important, some big person. And I said, now that I'm old and I know, you did terrible things to George Lucas. And he goes, oh, yes, I'm so ashamed. I'm so ashamed.
What sort of things would he do? How
he was like sabotaging the films. The ADs can sabotage a film. Like that guy in Man of La Mancha. Did you see the Lost in La Mancha? Did you see that documentary? Yeah. That AD said, no, we can't do this. No, it's a storm. No, it's this. And Peter and I watching the film, and I'm going, that guy, you always go in. Even as a storm, you take the crew in, And then after we watched that film, we flew off to do Wolverine. And that was the AD That was same AD. And I went, fuck me, that's the same AD who's trying to sabotage the film. Because I loved Terry Gilliam, and he had so many forces of nature against him. And the AD, no, we're not going to shoot. No, we're going to go back. And I thought I would, if I was on that crew, I would give that, kidnap that guy.
And on Star Wars, was it just born out of that kind of snobbery and that class system? And was it below them, do you think, in terms of Gil Taylor? Did he feel it was below him, the film?
When I came on, I was very curious because I said, what's all this about? Can I read the script? And people said, oh, it's not worth your time. And they were kicking it around on the floor. And I finally insisted. And finally, Peter Cohen, this American, let me in script. And Peter, if you ever saw this, I never gave it back because it was in my house. And then I let a lot of people, well, not close friends, stay. And somebody must have borrowed it. I did get it back later on, but he for many times said, Mandy, give me my script back years later. And I said, I don't have it. But anyway, Peter Cohen, his father was a producer, big producer. He was an AD on it. He lent me the script. And all the grips, the electricians, people that had in those days, everyone read the script. They said, this is nothing. This is never going to see the light of day. And I came in on a Monday morning and I said, you're all wrong. You are really wrong. You have no idea of anything. I don't know what you watch. And that's, that's the British film industry. It's a job, it's laborers, that it doesn't matter if it's a story about a human rights activist or a teddy bear, it's the same job, but when I knew I wasn't a laborer, I'd already been through school and spoke languages and had this and that. I knew I wanted to make films. So I wasn't there, to hump camera boxes. I wanted to work on good films. And in fact, on The Empire Strikes Back, I was working on a film with Richard Goodwin was the producer, and his wife, Christine Edzard, was the director. And we were in his studio in Rotherhithe. And there's a guy who put me under his wing, David Lenham, a wonderful guy, like the best. I mean, he was on Lawrence of Arabia. Kubrick trusted him. And, he'd stay up all night doing camera tests for Kubrick, and he'd sleep in the camera. So he was a very, very serious technician. And Dave Lenham also put me on the camera committee. So they found me, he plucked me out of nowhere, and then he kind of got me on films with him and he trained me up. And so we were out in Rotherhithe and we're at the camera and somebody says to me, Maddie, there's a phone call for you. And I said, impossible. There were no mobile phones this day. Michael was at home, but he would never call me. Nobody would ever call me. I said, nobody has this number. So I went to the office. I was very ashamed. And I went and I pick up the phone. I said, hello. And he goes, hello, my name is Bruce Shawman. And I just want to say that we tracked you down. We are preparing the next Star Wars film, and we would like you to join us. And I said, oh, that's very nice of you. I'm sorry, but I'm booked for the next 4 or 5 months. We're working on this film. I could never get off. Thank you very much. And then I went back to the crew, and there was David, and there was Brian West, and there was Richard Goodwin. He did all the Agatha Christie, all the Death on the Nile. He's a big producer. And the John Brabourne, who's the relative of the Queen. And we had it was Little Ida's Flowers or something. We had the Royal Ballet and Fred Ashton, and all royalty was coming every day. So anyway, I'm telling them, I got this strange call. They asked me if I wanted to be on this next Star Wars. And they all went, We all ate lunch together. And then they said to me, Maddie, this is just a little film. We're going to be filming vegetables and animation for the next few months. Maybe you should think about it. So I went home and I spoke to Michael. And I said, they called me about this film, and I hate, stopping a film because the other one's big and everything. And everyone finally made the decision for me. And they said, well, if you really want a career, this is better for your career. This could be a great opportunity. And it's also a compliment that they asked for you. Nobody asked for you. So they called me back the next day or a few days later and said, yes, I thought about it. And yes, I'd like to join. So then I went from there to Elstree. And we were prepping the cameras, except that our other crew, we're going to be a 2-camera main unit. The other main unit was working on The Shining. So we were sharing the same camera room. So there was Kelvin Pike, Peter Robinson, Morris Arnold, other people who didn't come onto Star Wars, but there was Doug Milsom. So I was there in the camera room doing tests and prepping with our unit. And then Peter or somebody pulled me on the set of The Shining. Now, the thing is, they say, now be careful, because if Kubrick doesn't like you, he does this visual thing and he checks you out. If you don't have the karma, whatever, if he doesn't like you, you're off. So I said, yeah, that's fine. Anyway, he liked me, so I could come all the time. I met Garrett Brown. They strapped on the big Steadicam. You know, Garrett Brown had just invented the Steadicam. They strapped it on me. It's like, oh. And we all hung out together, and then Kubrick didn't get off the stage. Just kept going on and on and on. It kept going on and on and on. And the office was tearing their hair out because they needed to start building sets and everything. And he wouldn't get off with The Shining. But anyway, there was the maze, there was the snow, there was visiting the big, you know, the hotel and those beautiful parquet floors, which mysteriously disappeared because people stole them. Everything from that set, people stole and brought home, or that was sold to somebody. And there was John Olcott, and there was
Kelvin Pike as well?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Kelvin was the operator, and we inherited him on Star Wars. He was the A camera, and we were the B camera on one main unit. The B camera, so it was David Goffeth was the operator, Chris Tanner was the focus puller, and I was appointed to them as the clapper loader, second assistant camera. They never had met me. I didn't know Peter Sushiski, but I knew his dad very well. His dad was my close buddy. We were on the camera committee together, and it was the time when all those Paul Wilson or all these old guys in special effects were, we don't want any foreigners. Those foreigners, we have to keep them out. They tried to keep out Storaro when he was doing Agatha. And David Lenham said, but by the way, the camera crew, us, and the electricians were all learning a lot, because Storaro came over with his operator, his focus puller, his grip, his gaffer, and they were teaching the British how to. So we were all on the camera committee, but I was hearing this, no foreigners, we hate foreigners. So Wolfgang Sushiski spoke with a very thick Eastern European accent, like that, almost like Dilmash. And so I huddled up to him and go, you foreigners. But I was halfway British by that point anyway. So I was on my way to becoming British. I was getting my passport.
And were you straight out to Finser then at that point?
No, I never went to Finser.
Ah.
We were the main unit was on the studio, and it was only the main unit, Kelvin, Peter, Kirsch, some assistants. They went out. Peter Macdonald said they came out for like 4 or 5 days, and then left the rest to him. Peter Macdonald was the director of the Norwegian sequence. They did like a few publicity shots, and then they went off. But we were stuck in the studio. So I never went out to Finser, except now when we go with the Huff people, because we were, when you're the main unit, you're stuck on the stages. I know that because Peter did all the Harry Potters, and he did second unit, which did all the locations and the whole film and the action, and the poor main unit is sitting on the stage doing the dialogue.
So was it common to have two cameras running then in the studio on films like that, or was this a particular special example?
Yes. No, no, because on these big things and these enormous stages, I mean, even on the first one, H was the biggest in Europe, you've got such big action and it has to match. So you get as many cameras in there as you want. You can't do it again. You've got explosions, people running, people jumping, maybe falling. So you need as many cameras as you can put in there. You've got the big sound cameras, you've got 2 PDSRs, then you've got some Arris, then you've got some high-speed cameras. All this you get as many cameras in there, and you've got it once. If it's once, it's great, and it all cuts together. There's no going twice on those kind of things. So, but what happened is we started falling behind after a month or two. And I saw in Robert's thing, and Paul was the one who said they were going really slow. For some reason, things were going really slow. And so we were falling behind. And then the main unit did the dialogue. And then we were there doing a complementary action, but it didn't have to be side by side. In the beginning, I was looking through the book today. You saw two cameras side by side for all the big stuff, and we always in the big, in the cloud thing. We always did when them running and with Billy D. Williams and things like that. We always had multiple 2-3 cameras so that you get everything that matches. But a lot of it is the inserts, the pickups, the smaller actions, with R2D2 and things like that. Then you didn't need the sync. In fact, the funniest thing on the first Star Wars, when everybody marvels when Carrie's going, "Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're my only hope." We were alone on the stage. That was sometime in July. There was like me and Jeff. Tony Browning wasn't even there, and Carrie, and that was like an insert shot on the big empty stage. And it's so funny.
It becomes a big iconic shot. Yeah.
Yes. So that's the thing on the first Star Wars. They had the party, and then we just kept shooting because there was so many inserts and little dinky things to do, and then I remember finishing in summer, I can't remember, and then finishing on a Friday, and then on the Monday I started with this guy Field and his crew on the Superman tests, but that was very boring, so I didn't stay long on that. I'm like action person. I was so spoiled with documentaries and with things where you move and your mind goes, there's no way I'm going to sit and do tests 1 or 2 shots a week and wait for the lab to process the film. Ooh.
So you've sort of described there that you were shooting a lot of the kind of the connective tissue, if you like, all the bits that join the scenes together and are those inserts. So presumably they were editing on site. Were they
on the first one?
Yeah.
Yes, because first of all, storyboards played a huge role in our lives. I mean, we had these big boards on the stage and all those little things like are in the book now, the black and white and everything. And we actually looked at them. And then the other thing was we'd have a Steenbeck or a Moviola, a Steenbeck, the real clackety one. Not a Steenbeck, that's the big roller one. The Moviola, I guess, where you take a bit of film and you put it in this machine, it goes clackety, 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 but it had a little screen like this. And you looked at it and you looked at the frame, and then the operator had to match the frame exactly, for the insert. The whole thing with the R2D2 when he does the arm and he turns it and he pulls it out again, that had to be perfect. So we had to stop the frame, look at it, and then make a mental image and look back and forth. The no video thing, and we didn't have any video. It was dry. And in that day too, the script supervisors, continuity girls, what they called them, were so important because they knew everything, the timing. They would have a stopwatch. Then they would know when the person entered at what line and where they finished and where they put the thing down. I mean, if you listen to Angela Allen, she's got in her head every detail of what happens. It was such a difficult job, paying such attention to everything, every detail.
It's weird, isn't it, that whole kind of view that women didn't belong in the film industry when in fact they fulfilled so many of the important roles. Like early editing was mostly women, back in Hollywood. And as you say, the continuity or script supervisor, as they now call it, is the person that's sort of keeping the whole shebang together and knowing. I've heard Angela Allen talking about how famous directors would say, "Okay, let's have her coming in from the right." No, she came in from the left yesterday. We need to do, and they go, "Really?" Directors are using them as their memory in many ways, aren't they?
But they were girls or women there, and they were also very close to the director, like David Lean. And I know about David Lean. So the people he had as his assistants also were involved with him. But in Hollywood, because I worked in Hollywood, they were men. The script supervisors were men. Like I think you see in Mank, when you watch the film, it's really true that everybody, when I worked in Hollywood, they said, oh, that was like makeup and hair was men too. It was a male all business. But in Britain, there was Maggie Unsworth, Jeff Unsworth's wife, who worked with David Lean, and they're like their brain. They remind them they missed the shot. Or Angela used to say, "You didn't do that. You didn't do coverage. You need an insert there. That doesn't match." And like she told and she was very stroppy. And Ann Skinner, of course, she was one of the greats, and she was on the first Star Wars, and she became a producer and director.
Yeah, she worked quite closely with Alec Guinness. I remember her saying once about some of his lines where he wasn't quite sure that his lines really read well in the first Star Wars, and she kind of asked George's permission to kind of have a little go at changing a few of the lines. So it's amazing how important that role is, and how important your role was as well. And also, paving the way for many other women. Hang on though, but I just want to say, paving the way for other women to come into the industry.
But just before we go to that, Alec Guinness, so they said one thing, don't talk to Alec Guinness, because he was pissed off. He didn't want to be in this kids movie, this cartoon film. So they said, be careful. You don't want to upset Alec Guinness. And there was one day I'm standing there. He's sitting there in the chair. There was another chair. So I just sat on the chair next to him, and I looked at him, and I looked away. I had a smile, and I looked again, like, is he going to bite my head off? And he goes, why don't you say something? He said, I'm not allowed to talk to you. I'm not allowed to talk to you. He said, why not? I said, because they told me I'm not allowed to say anything to you. It will upset you. And then he said, no, absolutely not. And then he kind of, we had this small conversation, but it was so funny. But he was not happy at all until he saw how much he earned on it. And he saw what a big thing was. And then the other thing was Carrie Harrison. And because, like Robert said, the two stars were Alec Guinness and the other guy,
Peter Cushing, yeah,
right, and they were to sign for 3 pictures, and Alec he broke his contract. He said, I don't want to be part of it. I don't want to be part of it. But then when he got so much money, he agreed to come on for the second one, and so paving the way for other women. Somebody did a book. A friend of mine in LA did a book, and she interviewed me about that, and I remembered on the
women behind the camera.
Oh, you know that. My Alexis, she's a real good friend of mine. She was in our group, Women Behind the Lens. We had this group Behind the Lens, and Alexis was part of that. So I was remembering on the first Star Wars, what was scary for me was that big blue monster. You see it in one of the books. I mean, it's the VistaVision camera, and George owned it. It's big blue base of a camera, and then the magazine is like this elephant, and it's 65, so you've got 1,000 feet, I guess, of 65. Is so heavy. And so they were testing me, of course, and we were one of the big stages, and they say, okay, Maddie, we're up there on the rostrum. Oh God, the ladder was so high, and this rostrum in the sky, because this plate camera was going to, take the plate of the whole thing, and then ILM was going to insert the stuff in. And I went, well, I could do it, because I was always very boyish and working out, and I had muscles, and this was enormous and very heavy. I mean, even me, I was going, So you have to hold on this magazine. But they were testing me, because I didn't dare look around, but there must have been 2,000 eyes watching me. Everyone was watching to see if I could hold this in one hand, hold on your left hand the ladder, and you kind of have to hold it too, but it's really enormous. I mean, this magazine, this camera magazine, is quite enormous. But that was my test, and I made it up. And I think I said to Alexis, it's in the book, I knew then that if I fell down, that would be it for women. There would be no more women in the camera department. So I was like gritting my teeth and going, I've got to do this. It was quite heavy. It really was quite heavy. But then I had an assistant, and he became a manager. It'll come back to me. And he said, oh, working with you was such a pain in the ass. You wouldn't let me even carry your boxes. I was so possessive, because I didn't want the boys saying, oh, yeah, Maddie, we carry your boxes. But once you're a focus puller, they carry your boxes for you. Me, I wouldn't allow it. I wanted to be like Tarzan. And when I lived and worked in Germany, they called me the kleine Schwarzenegger. The little Schwarzenegger, they called, because I was so, rough and tough. Yeah, die kleine, Madelyn, sie ist die kleine Schwarzenegger. I don't think I paved the way. I remember Harvey Harris saying, oh, Maddie, you let everybody down. I said, why? He said, well, first of all, you went to America, and second of all, you dropped out of the camera department. It's just, I'm into the story, like now I write, or I interview people, or I made films. I started making a film about, the other influence in my life was a guy called Marcel Ophels. He was the best friend of my husband, Michael made a lot of his great films, like Memory of Justice. We made the Barbie film. So basically we were chasing Nazis. Marcel made The Tsar and the Pity. So for filmmakers, they know that is considered the greatest documentary on earth. So when I met Michael, we did this film Pressure, but he had just finished working with Marcel, and I had been to film school, and I was, film historian. I worked at the NFT here in London. So I knew every film in the world. And I went, oh my God, you work with Marcel. Well, he was best man at our wedding. So we started making all his films. So the point of that story was that I had other things to do with my brain. When Harvey said, oh, you didn't become a camera woman, I can't name a breakout camera woman here in Britain. In France, there's several. In Italy, several. New York, America, forget it. But in England, there's something, they might get a little work, but they don't get a lot of work. They don't become somebody who can earn a living. They do these little artsy films or television or small. Now it's going to change. Now with Netflix and all those little things, it's getting on the big screen. But the feature boys, they have this attitude that they don't want women around them. It's a camaraderie, it's secrets, it's their lifestyle. They feel invaded when there's a woman there. And yeah, in New York, it was great because everybody's working. All the men have wives who work. In LA, it was a bit different. A lot of them had wives who sit at home by the pool while they go out working. So there's that attitude of, the women, they're doing their nails. But it's cultural. I think it's cultural because women don't mind being. And the other thing is the sexual thing. These days everybody's gay or bi or whatever, but the sexist attitude here, like the Gil Taylor thing, like women are for screwing or bonking on the side or having an affair, like all the men have affairs. Let's just put it that way. In England, everyone's having affairs all the time, and then they go back to their wife. So I guess in other countries too.
Yeah, I guess they're just trying to protect that kind of strange way of life that they've created,
When I ask people, well, why wouldn't you have a woman? And they say, well, I don't, if something bad happens, I don't want them to cry. Sometimes really bad things happen, or you make a mistake, or like David Watkin was a great friend. And he said, I don't mind if you screw up, but if you lie to me, you're off the crew. And it's true that sometimes you make a mistake and you just want to die, and women cry. You can't cry. It's just a job. You have to do it. And the men are very supportive. They cover for each other. But if you show a frailty like crying or embarrassment or I don't know, all kinds of stuff. I mean, I had assistants in LA. They wore see-through jumpsuits. They wore nail polish. I said, how are you going to lace the camera up with nail polish on? I mean, the absurdity, but they weren't there to do that. They were there to flirt with the star or the director or a friend, somebody I hired. She actually needed to do a benefit for her. So when I'm going, where's she was in Winnebago. I go, what the are you doing there? Well, I need him because we're doing a Hollywood Women's Benefit. I mean, it's like that. So there's a lot of, so that's why you never see, I'm very proud when I open the books, you never see me any of the still photos because I was working. I never wanted, a lot of people like put themselves, there's a still guy there and they kind of just, oh, I'm just here, I never was there. I never looked at the camera.
All the ones I've seen of you, you're with the clapperboard or you're doing something with the camera. Yeah, it's definitely
I
not
never
opposed.
looked at the still guy. On the first one, I thought I was persona non grata. So I just wanted to do my work, keep my head down, not call attention to myself. And I put my hair in a ponytail and I was frowned and I'm proud now. You don't see me there.
Okay, so we're at the halfway point of my chat with Madelyn Most, and we'll be back after these short messages.
Here's what some people are saying about the Projection Booth podcast.
The Projection Booth is single-handedly the greatest film podcast you could ever listen to or could possibly want.
Top notch. 5 stars. This has quickly become one of my favorite film-related podcasts. Always interesting.
A completely unpretentious yet fully comprehensive look at films from all genres.
The Projection Booth podcast, with new episodes available every week at projectionboothpodcast.com.
you tired of pop culture podcasts where the hosts exist in a constant, blissful state of agreement? Well, fear not. Let me introduce you to the Chinstroker vs. Punter podcast. Mike is an ex-film student with a penchant for David Lynch, and Paul is your man on the street who likes what he knows and knows what he likes. Join us fortnightly as we discuss what we've been watching from our own very different perspectives. You can find us at csvsp.libsyn.com. Chinstroker vs. Punter is a proud member of the Pod Syndicate family of podcasts.
You mentioned about Carrie sort of having a camaraderie with Carrie. How were Mark and Harrison on set? Because we always hear this thing about Harrison being kind of gruff, the older guy, and Mark just this jolly, happy-go-lucky guy. Was it really like that?
Mark was so bright and so alert and so full of energy and so full of ideas. And I look through the book and you can see him when somebody asks him a question, he'd look out in space, he'd think, and then he'd give you this original idea with so much enthusiasm. And he had a lot going on. He had Mary Lou, and they were having a baby, and he had so he knew everyone's lines, so he knew everything. He is such a brain. I expected him to direct one of the films. I also expected Carrie to direct one of the films, but Mark was such a genius boy, and he was so gorgeous. So the perfect little face, and then apparently he had that car accident, but he'd do anything, like in Finsa, he'd do anything. Go fall in the snow, do this, do that. He trained so hard for that battle. He was perfect. He was a joy. They loved doing publicity, always smiling, always, he even little things for an extra or a grip or something, he'd make a little quirp like, "Oh, you're wearing the same T-shirt as yesterday." He was so fine. He was a joy to work with. I mean, he was so lively and bright, and he had ideas. And with Kirsch, I think he'd suggest things. And I said that in another interview I was doing. I don't remember when, but Kirsch was such a wonderful director, because when I say he listened to everybody, obviously he listens to the actors and their feedback. Carrie wasn't happy with some of her lines, and she thought they were corny, which they were, and they'd go in a corner and they'd have a powwow and whatever. But he also listened to the production designers, to Peter Sue, he was very open. Kirsch was just like a regular guy. And you could talk to him about anything. He wasn't like this deep director. I'm deep in thought. You knew not to bother him, but he also would be a human being. He was like this big granddad to everyone. Everybody felt so safe with him, and you could try. And he was so enthusiastic.
He had a huge amount of pressure on his shoulders to do that sequel, though, and it's amazing how everybody speaks of him in the same way that you do, that he was relaxed and he was collaborative and he was willing to listen and make changes and, trust people to do what they were doing. But the pressure on him must have been pretty immense.
But he had made some solid films. And I saw in one of the interviews, only recently I look at these things, he said he wasn't making a science fiction film. This was like something else. And so he didn't have to worry about that genre. He was just making a thing. And like Paul said, that Kirsch said, people get bored when it's stressful getting to a certain place, or it's hard work getting to a certain place. You just cut that out. So he knew, because he had such a heavy background, and he was a photographer, so he had an eye, so he knew exactly where to put the camera. So he and Peter Sue got on like that, and they were very close. But you asked me before about Harrison. So Harrison, I knew in the first one too. He always said to me, "Well, I'm not an actor. I was a carpenter. I'm a carpenter, and I'm a friend of," because he's a friend of George's, right? So he's a carpenter, and then he got to be like the biggest guy in the world. But he's quiet. He reads a lot. His dressing room is full of books. He lived down by Wigmore Hall, so he went to concerts. He's like an intellectual. He was married to Melissa Matheson, who was this great screenwriter. So I mean, the world he lives in was full of ideas, but he was very laid back, if you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. Very laid back. and that was him, but he was very calm. He was because he was so solid with his relationship with George. The other person you should really talk about, and I'm so sad he died, was Gary Kurtz, even though people thought it was a pain
that
in
very
the ass.
thing. Yeah.
Because if you look at all the books, and he was glue. You know, on the second one, George admits he doesn't like directing. He likes editing. He thought it was a pain to come around, and he got such stick on the. He wasn't treated nicely at all the first one, and so on the second one, I think he came out once a month or once every 2 months, and the rest of the time he was in the cutting room and phone calls and stuff. But Gary was there every shot, every take with the actors. Are you comfortable? Do you need anything? He was there for every single moment. The crew didn't like him because he kept a tape recorder in his pocket. He wore this shirt with a pocket, and he'd ask them, and in Britain you don't do that. You don't say to the electrician, how long is it going to take you to light? Or you don't say to the DP, how long do you think this is? And they got really angry with him, and I kind of saw that he was on his own because, okay, there was Robert holding down the fort. Robert and it was like, I thought everybody in the world was like Richard Goodwin and Robert. You know, I thought producers were angels. Then I got in the real world, a bunch of sharks. But when he's very quiet and he's internal. And I went to some kind of luncheon with Peter, and one of the girls in the office who worked very closely with him didn't like him at all. She said, well, he never said hello in the morning. But he's the kind of guy that's so internalized. You could see he's thinking all the time. You know, he's wrapped in coding. And I would G him up. I'd say, you know who you remind me of? The Smith cough drop. And in America, there's a Luden's cough drop, and it's got sort of a Quaker profile on the Luden's cough drop. And he didn't know how to take that, because who's this kid telling the producer? He's thinking probably very deep thoughts, and I tell him he looks like the picture on the cough drop. But he kind of, he couldn't control his smile. He kind of creaked up like that. But then he knew he could get, you know, when everybody gets kind of tired, he knew I could wind him up with something, or I could make like a little remark, because you need a little to relax the tension, because he did have a lot of the weight on his shoulders. You know, some of the crew, which I won't mention names, he did a bit of, you can't say interfering, but he wanted to direct. So he did a bit of like stuff like that, which put people's out of joint, because like an army, you have to follow that kind of procedure. But I mean, he was closest to George, so who knows territorially what he wanted to do. So I'm sad he never got a BAFTA recognition when he died. He never got an Oscar, you know, in memoriam, and he did so much for so many movies, and he was so intensely there. He was so present, and that's the whole thing in finding a job where you can see your work on the screen. You know, in camera, when you get up there, you're either operating or DPing or focus pulling even. That's a very important job. I loved focus pulling. You can see your work on the screen. So you're not working for money. You're not working for glory. You're working because you're invested your life in making this image and making this story, and you can see the year of your life on the screen. And that's what it's all about. The direction of that film, the first one too, because he's always in every shot, he's taking stills. There must be 10 million, 1,000 billion photos from Gary Kurtz. He took everything, and he knew technically things, because he'd ask questions if he didn't understand something. But I remember one day he said, oh, we'll just get in Doug Trumbull or Richard. Well, I nearly fainted, you know, because I had read about them. Oh, we'll just get them. And then on the second one, everyone came out to visit. I mean, everyone. Fred Roos and Coppola didn't come, but a lot of really famous people. And I was just like sitting there going, oh my God. But I had known that. I worked at the NFT, as I said. I was an usher at the NFT when I was in film school, and in the evening. And so who was sitting in the audience? Truffaut. Who was sitting in the audience? Jacques Tati. I didn't dare talk to Truffaut because I knew he was so serious, and I had read his book with Hitchcock. So I thought, I'm not going to disturb him. I won't disturb him. But with Jacques Tati, because I spoke French, I would, and he invited me up because he was giving a seminar, and I had to ask the boss, because I was just an usherette, and I said, can I go? And she said, yes, of course. And we had this afternoon, and he was telling stories and this and that. So that's how I learned to break out of your skin. I never treated an actor like an actor or an actress. Like I couldn't give two figs if they're famous or whatever. It's how it's how professional they are on the set. If they know their marks, or they help you out if you're trying to measure focus, or sometimes with women, especially in Hollywood, they'd be acting all over the place. And I'd sneak up to them and go, this is a close-up. We only see you like this, so you don't have to do that big performance. I said, oh, thank you. Because the men never do that. But in Britain, the actors are trained. They've gone to RADA, they've gone to school. And also there's a more fluid thing. In Britain, I remember I worked with Freddie Francis. A close friend was Chris Menges. All these documentary guys Roger Deakins, all of them came from our companies. Chris Menges, Dick Pope, John Davey, all of them came from documentaries. And it was a free flow. People would say, how did you do that? And then they explain it to you. This is what I did, and I did that, and this and that. I went to America and I asked a question, and somebody said, I'm not telling you. That's a secret. That's my secret. And it was like, I said, are you crazy? In New York, Gordon Willis made these filters, and he said to my friend Ray Emirates, who made those golden filters, Ray, hide them. I don't want anybody to ever use them or to know about them. So it's like keeping up your $300,000 salary, whatever they get per week. It's not like the British Camera Department at all. Everyone was working for the benefit of the film. And that, I think, is the difference also in the camera department in England, where the camera operator works with the director, because the sets are usually so big, they're so enormous. I mean, Peter worked with Jeff Unsworth for 25 years. They worked on such big films. Jeff is lighting all these huge things, and Peter has to work with the director and the actors and composing this beautiful story inside the camera. Whereas you go to America, and their ego is they make the camera, they figure out, the DP figures out the shot with the director, jealously guarding that relationship, and then tells the operator to sit on, I know because I was an operator over there, sit on the dolly and be like a monkey. You saw the rehearsal, now you do it. And there's it breaks up the connection because it's like a hierarchy. Whereas in England, everybody flows. The focus puller, I was a focus puller, and my closest thing was with the DP. And I watch out, I stand by the camera, I know the lighting, I see the flares, I know what to flag off, I know the lenses. And often, just like John Olcott, the focus puller took over lighting if the DP had to go to another job. That's how he went on 2001. That's what happened with John Olcott, was always with Jeff. So the person, but not an operator. An operator is not looking at your lighting and knowing how you want to shadow the faces or the backlight or anything. The focus puller is paying attention to the lighting. The camera operator is working with the director. And that's why camera operators in this country become great directors, because they're always in the mind of the director, planning the shot and the movement and the actors. They get very close. In England, I think we get very close with the actors, whereas in America, you're told, stay away, keep your boundaries. They become so rich, and so they get such big salaries, and they've got bodyguards and all that stuff. And when they come over here, they can just relax.
Because you end up with that thing in Hollywood, don't you, where the directors are in like a black tent looking at a bank of monitors, and their actors are somewhere.
Well, over here too.
That happens here
over
now
here
as well.
Too.
Yeah.
But it's going the other way, because I visit Ben Davis on different sets, and he doesn't do it, but there was a time, and even Peter was working on these very big films, and there was the visual effects tent, and the did tent, and the did tent, and I saw a few actors actually have tantrums because the director was 50 feet away chatting with friends, and they were out there all by themselves. But I think it's changing now, because people are making things real and getting back to cinema, and relationships. So as far as I've seen on the last few times, everybody's dumped that because it's too alienating.
Hopefully the COVID doesn't get in the way of that as well and send it back in the wrong direction. So after you worked on The Empire Strikes Back, then what was your next big thing that you worked on? I mean, what direction had you decided to go in at that point, or were you kind of a bit more free flow and seeing where things would take you?
I was always working. I mean, I never stopped working, even it was the silliest little thing. Oh, I know what. Right after Empire Strikes Back, because I was so exhausted, I think Michael and I did a film around the world with the Aga Khan, something like that. We just did this thing, and we started in the riding place in France where he keeps his horses, Chantilly. We started in Chantilly, then we flew off to Rome, Costa Esmeralda, then we off to India. We went all around the world with the Aga Khan on a documentary. Then I just did stuff. Then a few months later, we went off to France to get married. And when we were on our honeymoon, we got married in Molière, and we got a call from Marcel Ophuls saying, we're going to chase some Nazis? Every Christmas he called, we're going to go chase some Nazis. And off we'd go. And we'd steal equipment from AKA. But this was, we got married. Then we were at my uncle's house in Bruges, driving through in our little sports car. Oh yeah, we got the call. And Marcel said, we're going to go to America and make the last 4 days of Jimmy Carter. We have permission to film in the Oval Office and even sleep there. The last 4 days of Jimmy Carter and the coming in of the cowboy into town. That's Reagan,
yeah.
So we flew off. And we were living there and getting ready to film. And then the Iranian hostage crisis came. And Michael and I had already been in Iran, because that's when I quit the Superman job. It was so boring. He was doing this big television thing with David Frost in Iran. That was so wonderful. Except at the time you weren't supposed to go to Iran. There was a boycott, except we subverted that. The British crew went on strike. And we had Savak on our crew, because the deal was that we would use in these little villages all the local people to help us do our scenes. And then we would build them a bathhouse. They didn't have one. And the production promised. And then they reneged. And then I remember Greg Powell and Nosher and all those people brought out all these stunt horses. This was enormous. This was a thing called Crossroads to Civilization. The Shah partially funded it. We had 3,000 extras. We drove, we came to location from Shiraz, Persepolis, to the fields, where we shot in Chinook helicopters. Anyway, Iran was wonderful. We made friends, everything. But it was too pro-Shah. And then Michael and I toured around Iran, and then we got caught in the pre-revolutionary stuff, and it was hard. We had to really fight our way out of the airport. So that's what we did after. That was 78 and 79 back on. So Michael was always busy. So if I wasn't working, I'd go off and work with him. I did commercials. I worked with Mike Saracen a lot. I kind of got around, I have to say that those big features where you stand around and wait, not the Star Wars, but the other big features, can be very boring. Yeah,
didn't you work on Coming to America? Was that?
Oh, well, that wasn't boring. I wasn't on main unit. I think we were doing the making of, but we were flipping over. But I became great friends with Eddie Murphy's cousin, and on weekends I was shooting documentaries with them. But in America, it's a whole different thing because of the relationships. But that was John Landis, and something bad happened on the film. I got carjacked, so that's like a bad memory. Yeah, one night, Friday night, and then I walked back on stage. Everything was gone: my car, my keys, my bag, my home. I couldn't get into my home. I was pale as a ghost. I went back. The producer was one of my friends. He goes, "Maddie, what happened?" So that was traumatic. And then I had to recover from that. I didn't have keys to get in my house in Venice. And then I fought my way into the union. Michael and I had been there 9 years. We had a company. We had a production company. And I used to produce little things as well. We had friends from England would come over because Michael had AKA, and they'd say, okay, set us up with a crew and locations and this and that. So we had a production company, and we did lots of that. And then I went to the union and I said, I've had enough. I've 9 years and we're trying to sign on as a signatory to the union. I'm not leaving this off on a Friday afternoon. I'm not leaving this. I'm going to sue you. I looked at the business manager. I'm going to sue you. He picks up the phone and he calls up Tony Richmond and he said, Tony, you're starting that Blake Edwards movie. I got this girl here. She's something like she's nagging me. She's something vulgar. He said, chopping my balls off. Can you see her? So I drove up to Bel Air. Tony Richmond is living with Jacqueline Smith, his wife. And he tells a story. He didn't interview me. I interviewed him. Anyway, we got on like a house on fire. So my punishment was that I had to work 30 days as a clapper loader. I was already shooting. I had 4 Atons. I was a good focus puller on feature films. But in the IA, you have to, no matter where you come from, you have to. So I said, it's okay. They're paying me thousands of dollars a week. So for 30 days, I banged a slate on this film called Sunset. And Tony's the DP. Blake Edwards was the director. And this is a funny story. You're going to like this story. And then...
Is that Bruce Willis and James Garner, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yes. Bruce Willis, James Garner, Mariel Hemingway, Patricia Hodge.
Malcolm McDowell? Was he?
Malcolm McDowell. Yeah. I knew these people from England. Patricia Hodge says, Maddie, she said, what are you doing with the slate? You're a great focus point. I said, I know, I'm getting in the union. And so this is the thing about nepotism or favors. I never would accept a favor from a big person. We're on Sunset, and I think I mentioned who my best friend's father was. But anyway, my best friend's father was Jack Lemmon, and I told you, at weekends he used to come to Denise's house, and we'd sit, and I said, I'm trying to get in the union, can't get in the union. And he said to me, well, I'm on a picture with Blake, and we've got a lot of Brits, and we got this cameraman, Tony, something or other, and I maybe could get you on. I said, Jack, it's so kind of you, but it would be on my reputation the rest of my life. It would be a sting. It would be a, whatever that expression is, it would be a
stain,
a black mark, a stain on my reputation, because the camera is something different. You can't just favor, you have to earn your way. So anyway, cut to like 4 or 5 years later, I'm on the Blake Edwards film with Tony Richmond, and Jack said to me, I'm going to come and visit. So one day I'm with the camera and everything and hanging out. All of a sudden, Jack Lemmon walks on, and Blake says, Jack, I didn't know you were coming to visit. He said, I'm not here to see you. I'm here to see Madelyn. I nearly died of death because I didn't say anything to the crew. And Tony goes, what? And I said, the truth is, when you guys were making the thing with Julie Andrews, they made it in their house, and not divorce his, divorce hers. Julie plays the wife of Jack Lemmon, and they're in Malibu, and maybe it's some film. I said, when you guys were making that, Jack said he could help me get in the union. I said, no, I have to stick to my guns. I have to earn my way. Cut to 5 or 6 years later, here I am. So I was very proud of my film. I said, but I'm stupid. Maybe I lose the 6 years and I'll do it the fast lane next time. But I sort of was proud of myself that I did get there on my own steam, because any favor that you get can get taken away. I mean, and that's the problem with nepotism and being the son or daughter of somebody. They're very hard on you in the beginning. Oh, you only got the job because of your father. Well, I didn't have a father, so I didn't have that. But the nepotism thing, when you look at Star Wars, well, there was Gil Taylor, there was Peter Taylor, there was Jamie Harcourt, and his father was a big DP. They all camera people were sons of camera people. And there was no room for other people, and they got all the breaks. And John Alcott, his father was the head of the studio. He got his pick of any film that he wanted. So it's like fast lane, fast track. And they were in the Super League. But on the other hand, if you're no good, you're going to get kicked out or put, sweeping up the cigarette butts. On the other hand, now that I know, there is something to be said for nepotism, because the kids grow up never seeing their parents, and their parents are always away on films, but they know the stress of it, the strain of it, what it takes out of your life. And I think those kids are owed something, that they've lost their parents. And if they eventually find their parents, the father that they never knew because he was always away, and they catch the fever or whatever it is that makes you love making films, then they understand. Now I know why my father wasn't at my birthday. Now I know why he came late for Christmas. So I can see it now. There's this wonderful guy called Conrad Holt Jr. He's the son of Conrad Hall. And he writes, I never knew my father. He was away making films. And then as a young man, he understood what this life is. And it's a life where you're more in love with making the film and being with everybody working than going home. I mean, I was more in love with being on a film, having breakfast, lunch, and dinner with everybody. And then when the film stopped, I'd be home in my kitchen going, oh, I'm all alone. Nobody loves me. It's boring. Real life is boring. If you love making films, you love being 3 o'clock in the morning, Wolverine, you're in the freezing cold and you're there with all these actors and we're all cold and giving each other tea and hugs and everything. I'd rather be there than in my bed, watching a movie, because it's a life experience, and the bond between us is so great because it's dangerous. Sometimes one day I was visiting Peter on that and everyone was silent going, what's going on? The wire, the camera was on a wire cable, like this flying camera, and it had broke and it came down like 4 feet away from Peter. So it could have killed him. Everyone was very silent. So, you go through times when it's very dangerous and people get killed or and it's risky, or people get sick and then you save their lives. So there is a bond between people in the film business that other people don't know. I mean, the people that are not in it, and that's why the greatest marriages or the greatest bonds between people who work together, who really understand it and love it. But the ones that sit at home while the person has flown in planes and went over the Arctic Circle and went down in deep sea diving and then you go to the rushes and you made it. When you sit in rushes and you share what you've done with all these people, there's like a tingle, there's like an endorphin that goes up. Everybody sees what they did. The grip is one of the most important person in the camera department. So that person sees what they did. The lighting person sees what they did. The focus puller sees what they did. The operator, the sound people, everyone, we all made something together. That's a buzz that I don't know, maybe in the theater there's a similar buzz, but you don't get to see your work. But it's a certain kind of buzz and it doesn't leave you. I mean, it doesn't matter how old you get, you still want to be invited back to the party. You want to go to the ball. It doesn't leave your system. I mean, I'm all the time visiting people. I still get a buzz watching them work.
Yeah, do you know what? I have a similar, you're describing my job there in a way. I work in live television and have done for 20 years. And because of COVID, now my job can be done remotely because I'm sort of live editing, if you like, live directing. And I miss the family. I miss the people that I've had relationships with for 20 years. I miss their company and I miss that kind of team bonding where, we'll do a broadcast and it's all on the seat of our pants and things went wrong, but we made them right. And, we got that shot despite all of the things that were against us. And then now I'm in a hangar pushing buttons, watching a screen. It's quite depressing. But
There's this wonderful festival called Kamrimage in Poland. And I just couldn't believe it because I started my career in England. Then we moved to New York and I got a Nebit and Ayatsi. Then we moved to LA and I had a career in LA. Then I moved to Germany and I had a career in Germany. Then I moved back to Paris. I started sort of a career, but I was making my own films. Then I came up to England to edit. Then I went back. My mother was ill. But at Kamrimage, there's everybody from all those different periods. So they knew me as a camera assistant. They knew me as a focus puller. They knew me as an operator. They knew me as a camera woman. They knew me as a director. And we're all talking. I mean, it's like a family. And everybody's, you just see these friends that you're so close. I'm close. I have to say that, can't say intellectually. I can't say emotionally, but in your mind, I can sit and discuss films with people and I'm so much closer to them than my own family. They have no idea what the feeling is. They're doctors, they're scientists, they're everything like that. They have no idea what we're talking about. They can't discuss the depth or the meaning of a shot or a sequence, or they wouldn't understand a Bergman film or Agnieszka Holland. And so film friends, people that you can discuss with. I mean, I work I'm a member of the SFCC in Paris. It's like, Sandy God, the film critics. These people are so deep. I mean, there's like Russian people. Did you ever discuss a film or a novel with Russians? Oh my God. That's like 10 times deeper than you could ever go. And this guy, I was on the jury in Cuba, in Havana, and I've got this friend, and he's a film critic. One film, he can write like 20 pages. he goes into such depth, and I go, oh my God, this is like
Another level.
tingles on my eyes. Yeah, totally.
And we all have our own baggage when we go and see these films. We all have our own experience, and therefore, no two people experience the film in the same way. That's what I love about it, that it really kind of... Go on.
I can watch the film through different periods of your life. It's a totally different film because you're seeing what you're going through at that point in your life. So you see things now and you take out of a film, oh my God, I never saw it that way. Oh my God. So it's like, I'm scared because I feel like I'm watching this film for the first time ever, you know?
Yeah.
So you can watch the same film 5 times in your life and see 5 different stories, or what is meaningful to you at that point in your life.
I hope you enjoyed my chat with Madelyn there. She's great fun, and her and Peter have invited me down to their house, perhaps to do a proper video interview with Peter, or just to hang out. They live on a nice little spot on the river, and they've said when times are a bit more straightforward, we can head down there with the kids and just enjoy some time and their good company. Peter Macdonald is the guest on the next episode, which will be available later this month, as I said. Peter worked as a camera operator on Superman 1 and 2, second unit director on just about everything, actually. If you look on IMDb, including The Empire Strikes Back, Excalibur, Batman, the Harry Potter films, Rambo First Blood Part 2, and then he went on to direct Rambo 3. And I do talk to him about that at some length. He's another person with great stories and a wonderful sense of humour, and I know you're going to enjoy that one too. Other forthcoming guests include editor Colin Goody. We're about to try and pin down a date in the next week or so. Art director Roger Christian. Author Helen O'Hara. Sound designer Gary Rydstrom has just agreed as well. And I've also got the contact details of a big director, and I'm just summoning the courage to contact him. More news on that next time, hopefully. I've also just got a lead on another big artist of Lucasfilm alumni. I really hope that this one comes off. His work was and still is such a huge influence on so many of us as viewers and listeners, but also people within the industry talk about him as the kind of gold standard at what he did. Again, hopefully more on that next time around. Thanks for all the chat and discussion on Twitter. If you haven't done so already, you can find me there as Jamie SWB. I'm also on Instagram as Filmumentries, and there's, of course, my filmumentries.com website. And the Filmumentries group on Facebook too, so got all the bases covered, I think. Thanks for joining me for this episode, and I hope you can do the same later this month for the next episode of the Filmumentries podcast.